What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Babbles Nonsense podcast. On today's episode, I'm going to attempt to do my best at speaking about women's rights and some things that have happened in social media lately that I've interacted with some men about. Not saying that I'm the one to call this out publicly, and this is in no way to be a man-bashing session on this episode of the podcast, but I think certain things, especially in the political environment that we are in right now, do need to be talked about. And although I don't have the biggest platform, I do have a platform to talk about this. So we are going to get into things like women's rights, fighting for body autonomy, and certain conversations surrounding these political stances, if you will. So let's get into it. All right, guys, so this is going to be a little bit more of a serious conversation, more so than what I typically do. And I wanted to talk about this because something happened last week that just kind of offset this topic. Since the new transition in power in the White House or president or whatever you want to talk about in November, I've had 3 specific conversations with 3 men on social media that I don't know. I don't even know how to say it because, like, everyone's entitled to their opinion. This isn't going to be to bash any political party or anything like that. I mean, I obviously have my stances and my beliefs and why I believe that. And I'm very aware that other people have beliefs that differ from mine, and that's perfectly okay. That's what makes America, America. But what I'll say is the rudeness surrounded around it is what bothers me. The things that people openly say without thinking. And I know we all say things before we think, and we can all, go back and say, I'm sorry. We can all go back and try to grow and learn from it. But I think it's those conversations that we have where it's just kind of that dead stop, where you can tell someone's not trying to learn and grow from it, and they meant everything that they said is the problem. So there's 3 specific incidences that I had. Like, I try my best not to get into political conversations with anyone just because it never goes anywhere, right? Because most people, I mean, that's what they say. Like, there's 3 types of conversations in the world that we shouldn't have, or not that we shouldn't have, but you should know who to have them with because it can just start a fight. And me and my aunt have talked about this before. Just because, like, in those conversations being surrounded around religion, money, and politics. And that's because most people have a deep-rooted belief system, and that's okay. I have my deep-rooted belief system. But I think, again, like I'm saying, it's the morals and the ethics that are surrounded around it when someone can't just open their mind and see a different point of view, or how do I word this? Or they are trying to put their belief system out there when it is damaging and harmful to other, whether it be genders, ethnicities, whatnot. So it's kind of hard to talk about because, again, when you do a podcast or you have a platform, it's more so like I'm not trying to offend anyone, even though I know I will, because my belief system is clearly different than a lot of people. I have a lot of women that listen to this podcast, so I would assume most women think politically the way I would. But again, that's an assumption, right? Like, maybe they don't. But before we can kind of dive into that hard conversation around body autonomy for women and, the evolution of women's rights, and then get into those examples that I've experienced since November, so from November till now, we have to kind of dig into the history of women's evolution, because I think we all forget, even women, I think we forget that it wasn't long ago that women just gained their rights, So we all know that women's rights have always been that uphill battle, But let's just begin with one of the most pivotal moments in the fight for equality, which was the women's suffrage movement. And if you know me, you know I'm not a history buff, so I had to do a little bit of digging and a little chat GPT to get some of this history because I'm just not a huge history buff, even though this particular year I have tried to get more politically involved or more politically aware, if you will, because it's something that affects all of us, and it's something that we have to start caring about. It can't be one of those situations where it's like, well, this doesn't affect me, so I don't care, because it does affect you in some form or another down the line, whether that be your child you have in 10 years, whether that be the family you're trying to raise, whether you're trying to stay on this planet for the rest of, you know what, I'm obviously we're staying on this planet, but I'm just using examples. But going back to the history lesson here, so bear with me for the history lesson that might be a little bit boring, but it's just something I feel like we quickly forget how not long ago these things, went into effect with women. So going back to the women's suffrage movement, so in the late 1800s and early 1900s, women in the United States began to organize in order to gain the right to vote. So it was women like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, I believe is how you pronounce her name. They rallied and marched and fought for basic political rights. And it took decades of resistance and women finally gaining the right to vote in 1920. So this started in the late 1800s when they started this movement just for women to vote. So women didn't gain the right to vote until 1920 when the 19th Amendment got passed. So let's think about that real quick. So it's 2025 and women gained the right to vote in 1920. So that was 105 years ago. And even though that seems, it was 100 years ago. Sure, but think about that. Like, it was only 100 years ago. Men have had the right to vote for decades and centuries, and even in 1920, it still wasn't just a clear-cut victory. After that suffrage movement where women were still subjected to countless restrictions in society with their vote. So like, women, even though women gained the right to vote, we still were limited. Like, we were limited in career opportunities, and the expectation was still surrounded by marriage and motherhood. Like, that's all, quote unquote, women were good for. So if you fast forward a few decades past 1920 and the fight for women's autonomy expanded into the realm of reproductive rights. So we gained the right to vote in 1920, and then still there was limitations around that. And then, in the mid 20th century, that's when reproductive rights started coming around, like birth control. It became one of the hottest issues in the women's rights movement. So in 1965, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the Griswold versus Connecticut that married couples had the right to use contraception, marking a major victory for women's autonomy over their bodies. But was it? And we'll dive into that in a little bit. But in 1973, that's when Roe versus Wade decision legalized abortions nationwide. It was a defining moment in the fight for women's reproductive freedom. But even after those victories, the battle for body autonomy was not over. Like, we gained right to birth control. And something I'm going to say here with birth control, and I think a lot of people have talked about more recently, is that, y'all can hate me for saying this, but like, why is it women's job to take birth control where, how do I say this nicely? It's proven, like, obviously, right? So women are pregnant for 9 months out of the year, right? You can only have one baby in 12 months. You physically can't, you can have twins or triplets, whatever. I'm just talking about you can only have one pregnancy in 12 months, okay? So if we can only have one pregnancy in 12 months, why are we trying to then put the reproductive responsibility on the women when men can literally have sex 20 times a day, if not more, and impregnate 20 women in one day? Why are we not focusing on men's reproductive rights? Because when we think about like studies, like medical studies and any kind of study in general, whether that be the diet industry, the fitness industry, medical studies, women were not studied until recently because our hormones fluctuate so much that it's almost near impossible to get an accurate study or to have that baseline where you want it, because every woman's cycle is so different. and you just never know how someone's going to respond to one thing versus the other. And that's why, like, I'm not saying I'm pro-abortion when it comes to like a form of birth control. And these are just my opinions and my thoughts. So y'all, please don't come after me. I am very pro-choice for people to decide. I have my own thoughts, and I've never been in a situation where I needed an abortion, and that's, I'm very fortunate for that. And so I'm not going to sit here and judge or make a statement of I would never do that or anything like that, because I don't know what I would do if I was placed in that situation. I would think that I wouldn't have an abortion because that's just something in my belief system, but I don't know. Like, there's certain situations, like what if I was raped? What if, there was something genetic wrong with a child? I don't know. That's why a long time ago, I personally decided that I don't want children. And it's not because I don't like children. I love children. My sisters and brothers have children. I'm an aunt to multiple nieces and nephews. My friends, I love hanging out with their kids. They're funny. I just personally don't want them. And a lot of it has to do with the political stances and society and how I feel our world is going. And it's just scary to me. But when it comes to just having the choice and having the woman's choice, I think that it's just crazy to me that we let men, mostly men, dictate our bodies when they have no idea what it's like. Like, there's a lot going on in the political community right now. Like, sure, if y'all want to make pro-life a thing and you want to overturn Roe versus Wade, why are we not then trying to figure out ways to help women have more children so they're not wanting to have abortions? And again, not all women are wanting to have abortions. There's certain situations I feel like where abortion should be legal, whether that be rape, incest, whether there's just certain things I do feel that if women need access to that, they should have access to it, because what's something we do know in society? Even if there's not access to it, people will find access to it, and it's way more dangerous and it's way more harmful to society and to women. But regardless of that, I'm just, not to get on a tangent about abortion, I'm just saying that if we're going to make birth control strictly for women and women's responsibility, then we need to make it more affordable. We need to make it more accessible, which they're trying. And I appreciate the stance on like the O pill. I think that's the new thing that you can get without a prescription at Walmart. They're still allowing the morning after pill to be utilized. But I just feel like we're not doing things about maternity leave, and we're not doing things about, raising a child in our economy where it's almost near impossible because children are expensive. And so I just think if you're trying to lessen something that you don't believe in, then I also think that you should try to enhance other aspects to where people don't need that option. But we don't do that. We just cut things out and say, you can't do that. I'm a man, you're a woman, you can't do that. And it almost makes you feel as a woman that we're going backwards to the 1800s by someone telling you what you can and can't do. For example, I work in healthcare. There's a lot of men that I see that have erectile dysfunction. And what do they want? They want a pill to fix it. And there's a lot of people that go around saying, well, it's God's will for you to have that baby because you got pregnant. And I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying, like, if we're going to play it to that aspect, because a lot of people play into their Christianity when it fits their narrative. If we're going to play into that aspect, then if it's God's will for someone to have a baby, I can get on board with that. But then also, it's God's will for you to have limp dick. Let's just say that, there shouldn't be a pill for you to be able to have it, I'm just saying. There's also men that have 14 different baby mamas, don't take care of any of them, and we're still not doing anything about that. We're allowing that to happen, and then these women, and for some reason, the women are blamed for this, right? Because again, we have to go back to the birth control aspect of it. It's the woman's responsibility. And me and my brother got into a huge argument about this. And we don't have to agree. We don't have to see eye to eye. Everyone has values and morals and things that they believe in. And like I said, I'm not sitting here saying that I believe people should just go out here and have abortions every day because they want to. I'm saying that there should be certain exceptions, and we shouldn't judge people for what they do because we're not in their shoes. And we do not know how hard of a decision that is for them in that moment, because I've never been in that place. So I don't know. And so it's hard for me to say, absolutely not, you should have figured that out beforehand. It's hard for me to sit here and say that, is all I'm saying. So enough of that talk. Let's try to get back on board with the history lesson. So we kind of ended prior, before me getting on a tangent, was that in 1973 is when the Roe versus Wade decision legalized abortion nationwide. So we can fast forward to today and kind of our climate that I was just recently speaking about. And, despite the progress we have made over these decades of women's body autonomy, it's I feel like, I'm not speaking for women everywhere, I'm just saying, like, a lot of women that I've spoken with, it just feels like our body autonomy is still under serious attack now in today's political climate. And we can take a look at that political landscape because in recent years, we've seen an alarming rise in laws and policies aimed at restricting access to reproductive health. The overturning of Roe versus Wade in 2022 was the big one that sent shockwaves through the country, leading to a cascade of state-level restrictions and bans and abortion access and all that stuff. And it's still kind of going on today. Like, we're hearing about certain states trying to make it illegal for women to cross state lines, and that, like, they're trying to then get, like, not make it illegal, like, if you come back into your state and you went across a state line to where it was legal. Which, again, like, you could say that about, like, smoking marijuana. Like, it's legal in certain states and it's not legal, but you don't put them in jail for going to a state where it's legal and then coming back to their home state. Like, that's where it's getting, like, really chaotic. It's just like, and if y'all don't believe this is happening, seriously, it is. Look it up. But regardless, it's not just about the abortion that's under a threat. It's the birth control, the gender affirming care, and comprehensive sexual health education that is also under attack. So we can take, for example, Texas Senate Bill number 8, which allows for private citizens to sue anyone who performs or aids in abortion. So the ongoing battles in states like Mississippi and Alabama, where legislation is pushing for extreme abortion bans, some with no exceptions for rape and incest. And even taking it a step further, because where the law doesn't become clear is like things like tubal pregnancies. And if you don't know what that is, it's where the baby forms in the fallopian tube and there's like, it didn't get to the uterus, but it's starting to grow within the fallopian tube, and it will not survive, and it will, if rupturing, kill the mother. Like, it's just 100% fact. So usually once you find out that you have a tubal pregnancy, you hope to find it early. Most of the time, I think they have to remove the fallopian tube, which then puts you at greater risk for not being able to get pregnant in the future. But it saves the mother's life. And it does obviously terminate the pregnancy because it's not going to, like, it has 100% non-survival rate. But even things like that, where women are going to emergency rooms because they're either hemorrhaging vaginally and having a miscarriage, or they're having tubal pregnancies and it's ruptured, because the law is so gray, there's certain areas where it's so strict that doctors are afraid to help women until it becomes life or death, because they're so afraid that they're going to go have to stand in front of a courtroom and defend their medical license because they quote unquote performed an abortion. And so let's think about that. So even the term abortion is just got such a negative connotation. In medical care, a lot of you probably don't know, like when you go in to have a baby, you have gravida, para, and abortion on, it's like GPA. And if you've ever, so gravida means how many pregnancies you've had. So let's say you've had 3 pregnancies, but you had 1 miscarriage. So you have 2 living children. Okay, let's go with that example. So you would be G3 because you had 3 pregnancies, P2 because you have 2 living children, and A1 because you had a miscarriage. So the term abortion also includes miscarriages, but because it has such a negative connotation, women are like, please don't put on my chart that I've had an abortion, because I have not had an abortion. So like, there's elective abortions, and then there's abortions that happen naturally, and that's called a miscarriage. But you don't see it GPM, you see it GPA. And so a lot of people forget that. And so like, even if it's a medicine-induced abortion because the baby was not going to survive and it causes a miscarriage, that is now, they're saying, illegal in certain states because the law is not, like, clear. It's just very gray. But it's not just about legislation. It's about the fight for women's body autonomy, because it's deeply tied to how women are portrayed in the media and politics. From the constant scrutiny of women's appearance to the framing of their reproductive choices, women's bodies are often used as political pawns or media fodder. And so the question remains, how much control should women have over their own lives and decisions, and how much should the government be allowed to control? You know what I'm saying? So the rhetoric around women's rights is very intense, it's divisive, and at times it's deeply harmful. And I see that a lot just being in the medical field. But we see constantly that politicians and public figures, usually men, I mean, there's some women, I'm not going to sit there and say it's always men, but it's usually, I hate to say this, white men deciding that women can and what women can and cannot do with their bodies. And they ignore the voices of women giving them these stories, or medical providers telling them like, hey, there are certain situations where this is life or death for the mother. And it's like people don't care. But what's clear is that women aren't backing down. We are, you can tell that there's a surge of activism going on. There's protest. There's pushing back against these political efforts. And one of the most notable movements is the hashtag #MeToo movement, which did spark conversations around sexual harassment, gender-based violence, and the right for women to be in control of their own bodies and voices. So you can tell that this is stemmed from the 1800s, and it's still going on today in 2025, which is almost mind-boggling and baffling. It's like we're going backwards, and a lot of people are saying that, you know. Even though the political landscape currently feels like an uphill battle, there is a growing wave of activism and advocacy that is fighting for change. Across this country, women and allies are organizing unprecedented ways to protect reproductive rights and defend our body. And one of those examples is the reproductive justice movement, which is highlighting not only the right to have access to abortion, but also the right to have a child and raise that child in a safe and supportive environment. And that goes back to the conversation I was having earlier. Like, if we want women to continue having babies and we want to eliminate the need for abortion, then we have to, as a society and as a political society, do something about that supportive and safe environment about having a child. Because we all know that like postpartum depression is real. More people are talking about it. We still forget how dangerous pregnancy is. Just because we have hospitals and stuff like that does not mean that pregnancy is still not killing women, you know? So we just have to remember that. And I think I think by more women showing up at the polls and voting in record numbers is what is championing these women's rights. But even talking about women, going back to voting and how we just got access to vote in the 1920s, this new bill that was passed, and I think it's called like the safe, what's it called? Let me look it up real quick. Yes, it's called the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. So it's the SAVE Act. And it actually got voted on and passed recently, but a lot of women were very concerned about it because there's a place in there that basically says, so it's essentially the SAVE Act in short is to prove that you're a citizen to vote, which we all agree with, right? Like we should all prove that we're citizens to vote. But the part in it that's very, again, one of those gray, it's not very black and white. It says if you have a different last name than your birth certificate, then you have to prove that you're a citizen. And so I don't know what they're going to put into place and all that. So I'm not trying to speak so negatively about it, but I understand where the women were coming from when this came out. Like I feel like they need to enhance it a little bit more and put more verbiage in there, because let's think about that. Most women who are married don't have the same last name as their birth certificate. I personally don't have the same last name as my birth certificate. I've never been married, but my stepdad adopted me. So I have my stepdad's last name, and I have to, and I know, like, even not just with voting, but like when I went to get my license or I graduated nursing school, I had to take my name change form, the legal document where I changed it to prove why I changed my last name, which I understand, like even when women get married, they have to do that. They have to take their marriage certificate to the DMV and all that stuff. So it's a lot that women have to do. So it's either going to happen one or two ways. Women are going to stop changing their last name and say, screw it, what's the point? Or they're going to have to like make this law where it's like less scrutinized, I guess, or where it's like, well, if you have a driver's license and you have a passport, you clearly proved that you're a citizen, so you don't have to worry about it or something. I don't know what they're going to do there. Like I know there's a lot of public and political debate about this current act right now. So we're just going to have to see how that plays out. But it's just little things like that. Like, we shouldn't have to worry about, can we vote? Because you have to think in the back of your mind, that's where it's like, well, do they even want women to vote? Because more women are showing up to vote, and women care about reproductive rights, and women care about all these things. Because it almost feels, and I'm not trying to say that it almost feels like we want the dominance in society to be white men. And why is that? Why do we want that? Why do we want to go backwards? We know that this nation has, grown and thrived off of diversity. And we need to continue to diversify our nation to make it such a great nation, because the cultures and the diversity is what makes America great, So yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. But so that was a long-winded historical lesson. But what kind of triggered all of that was this comment on Facebook recently about a guy I went to college with. So I wouldn't necessarily say that we're like besties or anything. Like, I did hang out with him a lot in college because a lot of my guy friends hung out with him. And he posted, and again, I'm just going to preface this, like, everyone's entitled to post what they want to post politically on their Facebook pages or Instagram, wherever. Like, obviously, yes, I can defriend and whatnot, but there's certain things that people post that I do feel compelled to respond to. And this one I definitely did. And it's usually when it's just rudeness about someone's character. So there was this article, and I don't even know if it's a real article or not. I honestly haven't done any digging or whatnot, but it was about Jasmine Crockett saying that she was challenging Trump to an IQ test. And whatever, you want to post that, post it. But then it was the caption above it that really triggered me when he said, my 9-month-old daughter is smarter than this woman, talking about Jasmine Crockett. So, where do we even start with this? So, I think before we even get into that, I just want to start out by saying I think this is something that we don't talk about enough, and that's just how comfortable the world gets when women do have confidence and are intelligent and, are showing up to vote and, we're standing up for ourselves, because we have had this huge movement since the 1800s where it was just sit in the kitchen, be quiet, do what your husband says. And now we're having more and more women each year speak up for what they believe in and what they stand for. And there you have a lot of vocal women like me who is constantly, called a bitch or told that I'm too much or that I'm too abrasive because I don't back down and I do share my own opinion. And then you have women that are very smart and, and they're called other things than just being smart. Or if someone's bold, they say she better smile when she says something. Or if someone's smart, then you have to also be sweet and not show too much intelligence. So it's just this, we're supposed to just downplay our thoughts and our processes and, look to men to lead. And that's fine. Like if we're going to go back to the female masculine energy thing, but I'm talking about true character and true, intelligence and things like that. So going back to the example of this guy posting that's what bothered me. So I did speak up and, I did tell him, and I said, the comment to me was I'm not making this political. If you want to share this and you're upset about it because you're a Trump supporter, obviously, then that's fine. That's your right. But there was no reason to then have to put Jasmine Crockett down. Jasmine Crockett is actually a very intelligent woman. She has multiple degrees. She graduated from Harvard Law. So what are you talking about? Your 9-month-old is smarter than her. That was just such a derogatory, rude comment that was just unnecessary. You could have captioned it with anything else. Anything. You could have just said, can you believe this? Or what the hell? Anything. But you didn't have to put her as a woman, especially a woman of color, down about anything. So my comment back to him was, you really didn't have to do that. I'm not trying to make this political. But speaking of being a girl dad, wouldn't you be very upset if someone was speaking about your daughter the way you're speaking about Jasmine Crockett? Because that's something that really blows my mind about men that have daughters, is that they don't even stop to think. I'm not saying again, this is not just I know there's a spectrum. I'm just speaking about this far left spectrum. it just blows my mind, even in dating, not just politics, that when you're treating a woman a certain way, like the thought doesn't cross your mind, like, this is someone's daughter. Would I want my daughter to be treated the way I'm treating this woman? And that's just baffling to me. And the fact that he responded back to my comment saying, well, my daughter, what did he say? He said, well, my daughter, he said something like, well, even though she's someone's daughter, doesn't mean that her comment wasn't stupid or something like that. So like, I had to hit him back, and I'm going to read exactly what I wrote. So I had to hit him back with this response. As I said before, let's just hope your daughter never expresses an independent thought that someone decides to tear down the way you just attempted to do about Jasmine Crockett. Your response makes it clear where you stand, and for me, this isn't about politics. It's about basic decency, empathy, and how you choose to speak about women, especially women of color. One day your daughter may be the one on the receiving end of a careless comment like yours, and when or if that day comes, I hope you remember this moment because you are setting the tone for what's acceptable and will have no room to be outraged. The fact that you, a father, can't even recognize the weight of your own words is disturbing because this isn't just a difference of opinion, this is a reflection of character. And honestly, it's not a good look. It's best we go our separate ways on Facebook, not because we don't see eye to eye politically, but because I refuse to engage with someone who defends disrespect under the disguise of just speaking the truth and refuses to see how the comments being made are not only disrespectful, but downright rude. And he deleted the post, which, point proven. It wasn't about the post and the picture or whatever. I don't care that you support Trump. I've literally seen your timeline since November and I've said nothing. It was this one rude comment about women. And clearly y'all can tell I'm aggravated by it. And I think it's just recently that it's been bothering me. Like, clearly I've been a woman my whole life. Like, it's never really bothered me. I wouldn't say I'm like an overly active feminist, but I think just in most recent times in my life, like especially with my job recently where I had to negotiate my salary and things, and comments being made about, like, I was very professional during it, but it's almost like I was never called a bitch or anything like that, but it's almost like that's how I was made to feel. Like, I was made to feel like I was asking for too much or I was being too outspoken. And me and my aunt again had a conversation about this where it's like, if I was a man in that moment, it wouldn't have mattered what I said because men are allowed to ask certain things and they're allowed to be assertive and they're allowed to have that characteristic about them. But if a woman is outspoken or a woman is, not backing down and they're standing their ground and they're speaking very professionally, then we are considered a quote unquote bitch. We are considered, unruly or too much. And it's just, I think because, I'm nearing 40, it's just too much sometimes. And I think that society could all do better politically, societally, workforce, dating, all of it could just be better. But anyways, again, tangent. Going back to this comment by this guy, like it really struck a nerve with me. Like, it just really made me realize, and then like just reflecting on everything in my life, like going back to the birth control situation and the conversations I've had with men about that and whatnot, it's just crazy to me. Like, it really is insane. Like, women and men just do have a different thought process. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of my very best guy friends, I just love having conversations with them about that because they're very open-minded and they do sit down and like we can have like talks and we don't necessarily have to agree, but then we both walk away learning something. And changed behavior is the way to address what we've learned, not just speaking about it. But yeah, it's just, it's just exhausting. It's a trap in a way. But what I'll say is I'll take away, like, I used to get really bothered when someone told me I was too much or I was, I was strong or I'm intimidating or any other word you want to put in there that where a woman just stands up for herself or knows what she wants or very career driven. Just know if people make comments like that to you, like, it used to really bother me. But I think, like, just as I age and the more people I talk to and like working in therapy, I just think it just means you're doing something right. I think the truth is that smart, outspoken women scare small-minded people. And, we should. And that just, if someone's coming at you pretty aggressively and you know that you're speaking professionally and you know that you're coming from a place where you can change things or make something different, or you're the right person for the job, I think that you are dealing with a small-minded person who can't even fathom a thought outside of what they're thinking. And that's on them. Continue to speak boldly, continue to think critically, and never, ever, ever let sarcasm stop you from taking up space in this world, because we have to continue fighting that fight. It's going to be a fight for a really long time, unfortunately. But I'm just going to end it right there. I'm sorry I babbled a lot, but I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And thank you again for allowing me the space to vent my frustrations out. But if you felt this episode and you liked it, then I hope you will share it with someone who's been, underestimated in the past, and remind her that she's not alone. So until next time, guys, keep your voices strong and your standards high, and bye.